Stewart, Senate Republican leader. Welcome to another weekly press briefing. Again, we'll keep the same format of a briefing on a specific caucus priority, and today that'll be done by State Senator Eric Brakey, who's going to talk with you all on the caucus positions we have as it relates to welfare reform. And then we'll take some Q&A at the end as well. We'll try to save about 10-15 minutes there as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Senator Brakey.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Well, thank you all for joining us. I am Senator Eric Brakey, representing the people of Auburn, New Gloucester, Poland, and Durham. And today we're going to be talking about, I think, a big problem that is really facing our economy and so many of our businesses in the state, and really a lot of Maine people, which is our declining workforce participation rate and many of the contributing factors to that. I think when I look at the legislature and I look at the priorities here, we really have a tale of two priorities: paychecks or welfare checks. And when you go back to 2015, when I was the Senate chairman for the Health and Human Services Committee, the LePage administration did something very effective on welfare reform that has, in the years since, been disregarded. They stopped issuing waiver requests to the federal government on the SNAP benefit program. They stopped requesting waivers to get rid of the work requirements that are required by this federal program. They started requiring working age, able-bodied adults without dependents, so without kids, to work, to volunteer, or to do some kind of job training after a 3-month grace period in order to remain eligible for the program. The results from that were pretty astounding. We saw in the course of a year, the average income for those affected by that policy change increased by over 100% as working age adults got back into the workforce, took raises at work, and really got involved in the workforce. Well, since under the Mills administration and since the COVID emergency, those work requirements in SNAP were suspended. But with the emergency ending at the end of this month, those requirements will be going back into place from the federal government in the SNAP program, requiring able-bodied working age adults without dependents to work, volunteer, or do job training. The question is, on February 28th, is Janet Mills going to request a waiver to tell working age adults that they don't have to go to work when we have 40,000 open jobs in this state? And our workforce participation rate is well below the national average, and certainly well below where it was under the LePage administration. Just for a snapshot, in 2019, Maine's unemployment rate, this was before Medicaid expansion, Maine's unemployment rate was 2.6%. The labor force participation rate was 62.5%. Today, those figures stand at 3.8%. and 57.9% respectively. So our unemployment rate, while we're still at full employment, our unemployment rate is higher than it was then, and our workforce participation rate has fallen significantly, well below the national average. And so our request is that Governor Janet Mills does not seek this waiver, and that she does not seek this waiver, and that we get people back to work. So just to understand, you get a 3-month grace period if you're an able-bodied adult without dependents. 3 months, you can get SNAP benefits, and after that, you got to work, volunteer, or do job training. So we're asking Janet Mills to say no to requesting that waiver, and we're also asking the Maine legislature to put it into statute, because we believe it is time to put this into statute, that for able-bodied adults without dependents, for SNAP, for Medicaid, and for general assistance, that there be a requirement that you work, volunteer, or do job training to remain eligible for these programs. So that is one caucus priority that we have right now, work requirements for these welfare programs. But another problem that we see is in the unemployment program, in ways that the unemployment system is being taken for granted. Now, remember, we have 40,000 open jobs right now in the state. And I hear from, and I know that so many members of our caucus have heard from constituents, oftentimes small business owners, who are falling victim to something called ghosting, right? Where people who are trying to remain eligible for unemployment benefits apply for a job so that they meet the requirements in terms of applying for jobs, that they never show up for the interviews. There are several bills put forward by this caucus in order to address this problem of ghosting and try to bring some more accountability. I know that Senator Guerin has a bill, Senator Stewart has a bill, and I do as well. To try to bring some accountability there, that if you're not showing up for the job interviews, the employer should be able to report that, and you should not be able to continue to collect unemployment benefits when you aren't actually fulfilling the spirit of the requirement there. So those are two priorities for the caucus: work requirements for able-bodied adults without dependents, and reforms to unemployment to prevent the abuse of the unemployment system. I'd be happy to take any questions people have. I know that there is a handout that went out to everyone, put together by Mike Fern in the Senate Republican office, with a lot of great information here, including on declining workforce participation rates and how the effects we've seen, the expansion of welfare programs to able-bodied populations contributing to that. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any. Or
yeah, let's start with questions as it relates to this subject, and then we'll save some time at the end for sort of carte blanche, whatever you guys want to talk about.
Just Senator Brake, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, are you drawing a correlation between Maine care expansion and decrease in workforce participation rate? Is that what this graph is intended to represent?
I can't speak to that graph, but I would say yes, absolutely. Now, I'm not here to relitigate Medicaid expansion. Medicaid has expanded. It's been that way for a couple of years now. But it is worth acknowledging that expansion went largely to able-bodied populations, oftentimes without kids, and we are at the same time seeing a correlation between that and declining workforce participation. And I think if you just think about it conceptually, it makes sense, right? When you say you can be eligible for this program where we're going to give you free taxpayer-funded health care, but the requirement is that you can only make so many dollars, and we're going to cut you off if you do more than part-time work. I think it's pretty obvious that that's going to have an effect on workforce participation and underemployment. So, look, so Medicaid expansion has happened. That's the law of the land. If that's been a priority for Democrats, if we're going to maintain that and it's going to be sustainable for our workforce, then we have to have work requirements on that program to eliminate this incentive for people to drop out of the workforce.
I think what you just described there was the welfare cliff, if I understand it correctly. Does your caucus have any priorities with addressing that so folks can work more without absolutely getting cut off from benefits, have it be a more smooth transition?
So there are different ideas in there. You can call it the welfare cliff or the welfare pit or the welfare trap, however you want to describe it. But certainly there is this phenomenon where people hit this ceiling where it doesn't make sense to take a raise at work because you would lose more in benefits than you would gain. There are a couple of bills in. I have, I think, 2 bills in designed to address kind of welfare cliffs, both in the TANF program and in the Medicaid program. I will say the challenge with Medicaid is that it is an all or nothing program. There's no way to do a 50% benefit for Medicaid, right? You get everything covered or you get nothing covered. So you take that dollar raise at work and you find out you've lost your main care benefits. I do have a bill in that is seeking to address that. It's requesting a waiver from the federal government for a pilot program where we could allow people to opt into a more HSA model of Medicaid. But that's a bill I'm personally putting in. I haven't discussed that at length with the rest of the caucus, so I'm not here to say that's a caucus position, but that's certainly an idea that's on the table that I'll be pursuing.
And Eric, I'm just going to add to that too, that I think a big problem that we have in the state of Maine is this poverty mentality. That there's no way we can ever pull people out of poverty. We just have to work with them in poverty and hope that we continue to pile on benefits rather than address the root cause, which is getting these people out of poverty and onto a path of self-sufficiency and success, frankly. That's what Republicans are really prioritizing, not more and more benefits for various different programs and expansion here and expansion there. But let's address the root of the problem. This is the best economy for a worker that we have seen in certainly my lifetime and others as well. So now's the time to strike while the iron's hot and make sure that government isn't getting in the way of that we're creating a pathway to success for these folks that doesn't involve them, staying on these what were intended to be temporary programs to help people out in a pinch that have ended up going from a safety net into a hammock. That's not the intent. The intent is help folks out that actually need it, but importantly, get government out of the way so that these folks can lead successful lives for themselves and for their families.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. And I will say, it is also worth mentioning, I think when we are talking about how we're setting priorities with our social safety net programs, right? There's often this choice between we have a safety net, who are we prioritizing that we catch? And right now, as we've expanded welfare to able-bodied populations, and we've enabled kind of a long-term dependency rather than really trying to make these programs, as Senator Stewart said, function as a safety net that catches people and helps them get back on their feet and transition to independence. We've created a system that catches people and punishes them when they try to get off that system. But that's also taking resources away from other populations that are still being underfunded. We still have underfunded wait lists for adults with intellectual disabilities. We still have underfunded nursing homes. And so this is, it's also a matter of setting priorities. Who are we catching first? Our most vulnerable or those who are able-bodied and working age? And we should be really encouraging to get into the workforce and take one of those 40,000 job openings that's out there.
One thing, the packet alludes to the public health emergency ending this spring. Obviously, the year after that, the state's got to return to the regular Medicaid rules. They've indicated that they do want to take that full year. Do you guys plan on pushing them to go faster? Red states, other red states have indicated plans to do.
So I haven't discussed that with the rest of the caucus. I can't speak to the caucus position, but what I would say is that we are united and there need to be work requirements for able-bodied adults without kids who are going to remain on Medicaid for an extended period of time. If you got 3 months, you fall into hard times, you got 3 months with, you get access with no requirements, but after 3 months, we're talking about people who have their full physical capabilities, their full mental capabilities, and there are 40,000 jobs out there. So yeah, if you're not willing to take one of those jobs, or you're not willing to go and volunteer, or you're not willing to enroll in job training, something to get you off the sofa and into the workforce, then you shouldn't remain eligible for these programs after 3 months. That's a point, that's a line where we cross from helping people into enabling people.
And one other bit too that I think is really important, not on the Medicaid side, but on the unemployment side. Right now in Maine, you can qualify for 6 months of unemployment. Well, how much sense does that make? Again, this is the best environment for a worker, an employee, to go and get a job that's going to be paying at a higher wage. I mean, we see it, right? This isn't, you can walk down Main Street in any town and you'll see the help wanted signs and also the substantial increases in what the pay is. The point is, why the heck do you need 6 months of unemployment? That doesn't make any sense, not in this environment at least. And so another proposal that we have coming from the Senate Republican caucus is to index unemployment benefits with market conditions and what's actually happening out in the real world, rather than saying you get 6 months no matter what the circumstances are. That doesn't make sense, right? If you made it 12 months or 12 weeks, for instance, because the economy's doing well and you've got a good opportunity for workers to go find meaningful, high-paying jobs. First off, the data says in other states they're going to take 11 weeks, but that 12th week, that's when they're going to really go make a move. So if we make it 6 months, how long do you think they're going to take? 5.5 months, and then they might start looking for another job because there's no sense of urgency there. But there ought to be. And again, this is about turning people's lives around that are currently receiving some sort of governmental benefit. Let's focus on that, right, rather than expanding another program or creating a new program.
So you guys are okay with the Medicaid transition as the administration's mapped it out?
I'd have to get some more details about what exactly the plan is and how that's going to roll out in practice, but happy to get back to you on that, Mike. Thanks. Okay, in the interest of time, too, we can open it up to any other questions folks want to talk about. We can still talk about this, obviously, but if anybody has anything else they want to go over today.
It seems like a good transition to paid family leave, which of course is a lobby day here. I'm just curious about the caucus's position on that? Is there any receptiveness to, entertain or negotiating around a proposal? We don't know what they're gonna come up with yet, obviously, but
Right.
I guess I'm kind of wondering if you've polled your caucus members to get a sense of what their receptiveness is to a paid family leave proposal.
Yeah. So the short answer is no, but again, you hit the nail on the head. There is no hardcore proposal that's being pushed out right now. It's a concept draft. So let's wait and see what the actual proposal is, and then we'll have a conversation. I'm sure that'll be very robust internally, and figure out where we're all going to be on that issue. I will say though that there's a general concern though, and it's not just shared by our caucus, but certainly in the business community as well, and it should be a concern for employees and workers too, that any institution of a new tax on them and their wages or on businesses in Maine is probably not going to be received well by Maine people, right? I don't know of anybody that's really excited about that prospect. I think that from a high level is a major concern of ours, and one that you'll probably hear regardless of what the proposal is. Any new tax on those folks, bad idea.
You've got the referendum hanging over kind of everybody's head on that issue. Does that make it more of an incentive for you guys to kind of try to stay attached to some sort of potential compromise if that's something that hangs together here in the next few months?
We'll see how it shakes out, Mike. I mean, I think the long and short of it is the referendum underscores the fact that the system is being abused, right, in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. And instead, we're going to have a robust conversation in this building. You'll have 186 people that will try to figure out what, if anything, makes sense to do. But then, if the wheels fall off the bus at any point in that process, you'll then have a one-sentence proposal out in front of voters who knows when, and that one sentence will then supersede any and all work that's been done in this building, and any and all logic and reasoning that went into any decisions that were made because of special interest groups and frankly a lot of out-of-state money. That doesn't make any sense. Awfully quiet today. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Hi.
Go ahead.
Going back to the unemployment questions, I have a bill that requires people to attend their interview as scheduled, and if not, there would be an online portal that employers could report somebody not coming to their interview. And I think employers statewide have talked to me about this. I'm a small business owner. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the office to do an interview and had the person not show up. And this not only hurts the small business owners, this is hurting Maine people who need services. My son had a broken pipe along with many other Mainers this week, and when he called a number of different plumbers, they said they had 50 to 60 calls ahead of him, and it could be up to 2 weeks before they could get there to help him with his pipes. Well, we need people working in all these segments, and there's many free training programs and low-cost training programs to get people working, and that's part of a work requirement. They can do the training because we need these people supplying the services to Maine people. If you go to the hospital, you need a nurse, you need a doctor. So it isn't just businesses who are suffering, it's Maine people who are suffering. Even small sufferings like the coffee shop is closed because they can't have enough staff to staff it. So when we're looking at welfare reform, it's not only for businesses and taxpayers, it's for people who are using these services throughout the state.
That's a great point, Stacy, and I think it gets back to what we've been saying all along here, which is that there needs to be more accountability and transparency in state government, and that speaks certainly to the accountability aspect, and you'll hear our caucus talk about those points throughout the entirety of this session. Seeing no other questions from you folks, appreciate everybody's time this week, and again, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. Thanks, everyone.